saw another main contractor apparently is going to start talking with supply chain about the value that they're adding. So you don't know what could shift in that relationship. You don't know if they might have a new commercial director come in who just completely changes the tone of how it is to work with them. There's just a lot of reasons that I think it's not sensible to, even if it's been a really great, meal ticket kind of, they're great, they look after you, it's amazing, they always pay you on time. I think it's pretty sensible to keep your keep your hand in the game a little bit with maybe just seeing if you can get one other nice little, maybe smaller tier 2 main contractor or something, be tendering for them and see if you can't just get one other in the mix there.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the Build Smart Blueprint, where we focus on building better business practices in the construction sector. Today, I'm really happy we've got Eve Lameks, who is a seasoned QS with a lot of experience, not only in the UK, working on some projects that went into the hundreds of millions, but also, which is where we're going to focus, I believe, today, is she has co-founded the Tender Trainers, which focuses on bridging that knowledge gap between the main contractor and subcontractor. I'm sure she'd be able to explain this better than me. I'm really, really happy to have you here. I'm actually on holiday, but I was so sort of pleased to find a time that we could do this, because I think it's so valuable. I think this whole area that I think we're going to talk about is so valuable to owners of construction businesses who do want to do it right, which is kind of what we focus on. The guys that want to run a business correctly, run a business properly and profitably. So just before we started recording, you started talking about that which was not necessarily the 10 stage, but that whole cycle, and your thoughts around that. I'm really happy and really interested to just jump right in there and
Let's do
give
it.
us your thoughts.
Let's do it. And thank you, Arthur. It's really lovely to be invited, and really excited to be here with you both as well. So guess what we were just speaking about, some of the kind of problems that we see subcontractor, main contractor side, and a lot of what we're doing with that knowledge gap is our kind of mission is helping subcontractors get to final account with profit in hand and knowing what that profit margin is. A lot of the clients that we work with, they'll know their profit margin when the accountant tells them at the end of the financial year. If they have multiple projects, they don't know which project it is. The problem with this obviously is many-fold, but some of the problems with not being clear on your profit margin or what's happening on your financials over the course of the project is that if something goes wrong, you can't address it. So if your costs are way off what you estimated, if you're not clear on that as you go and clear on what's happening with your profit, you may not obviously realize it. Another problem with that is if you're running multiple projects, which most construction companies are, you subcontractors, we're working multiple projects, you don't know which client is profitable for you, which type of project, which ones you're usually having problems on, which one you got the estimate wrong, so why? So there's kind of a real lack of understanding data, information, knowledge around what's happening with for a lot of subcontractors, not all, but for a lot of subcontractors, there's a lack of kind of a grasp of those numbers, which means that, they can't kind of ensure, know if they're getting profit, but also change tact if they need to make that happen, because there are things that you can do, and I'm sure we'll jump into that, but there's things you can do to kind of realize that for yourself as well. So that's what we feel really passionate about. Construction, our vibe and your vibe is not scare stories or anything like that, but construction does consistently have some of the highest rates of liquidation for SMEs in UK out of any of industries. It kind of goes in between construction and hospitality, I believe. And we just don't want to see that for companies. Like, we want to see healthy construction companies. And so the knowledge that we have from working for main contractors and now working with subcontractors for 5 years, we just want to get that out there as much as we can. So thanks again for this opportunity. Just to come full circle on that monologue. It's great to have the chance to speak about it.
If I could ask you just quickly on that, as you were talking there, I was wondering why, because I actually thought, yeah, I was the same when I was running my firm, like just talking about just getting excited when I won a job or the firm won a job, but didn't really say anything. As soon as the job finished, it was like, okay, whatever, just on to the next job to win. And you're obviously, in the last 5 years particularly, spending a lot of time working with subcontractors, mainly, I think, trying to change this mindset. Do you think it's something in terms of the type of profile of a typical builder as to why they focus on that? Like, where do you think that comes from as to why there's such a focus more on the winning the job and less so about the details of what happens, and final account?
I absolutely think it is. I'm really interested to see what you think about this as well, JP. But I believe that it's a lot of the clients that we're working very entrepreneurial, very get up and go. Let's go out and win the work. Let's make it happen. Entrepreneurs often aren't great at tracking loads of admin, tracking loads of data. This is a massive, what's the word for it? Stereotype, right? But this is what I see with our guys. They've come off the tools. They've got loads of get up and go. They'll go out and get the work in. They'll make sure the work happens really well. But that kind of day to day, like, let's see what happened with the receipts today. That's not really their driving force or their interest. They want to be out building with their hands. That's what I see with our client profile. Now, that's not to say that they, should do that. They just need to have the right processes and the right people or the right systems in place to help that to happen. I think that's why it's not natural for them. But it's so important for the longevity of their company, and for kind of business health and so on.
I think going back to, remember, we had a previous guest, Tim, who talked about this inside guy and the outside guy, and he said the outside guy is the guy that goes around and he gets the workers working, and then the inside guy is more sort of in his office. And I think if we're honest, like I'm more an inside guy, JP's an outside guy, and he said they make the good partnerships. I think the business wouldn't start if it was just an inside guy. I think that to get the business up and running and going, you need that outside guy that's going to be like, I don't really care about the receipts. I just need to get work. I just need to get things working.
What I'd add to that, Arthur, is like most clients don't give a shit if you're not that good of an inside guy. It's more important if you're a better outside guy, because really they need it built right. That's priority. And, let's be honest, most main contractors or clients, if you go out of business, you don't make money. That's unfortunate, but it's not my problem, kind of thing. That's kind of like... that's how from my time working as a main contractor, that was it was more important whether they can build well and they're a good builder.
Yeah, I completely agree. Also, not to be too negative, because that's not my style, but 10 years working for main contractors such as Multiplex and Mace and companies like that, I've seen a lot, and I think what I would say is not always, but sometimes it's not really in the main contractor's best interest that you're a really great inside guy and when you should be putting in a variation, putting in a claim that your final account isn't on track, that you haven't sent those 5 emails backing up the claim that's to come. They're not usually so bothered. It is just like, hopefully you're cracking on and getting the work done. Now, if you work for someone who's really solid and fantastic, and you've got a really great working relationship with them and you're an amazing outside guy, you probably can get away with it. But I think where people come unstuck is, even if they've worked for one client multiple times, a new quantity surveyor starts, or they start on a new project with a different team, or they start with a new client, and suddenly that outside guy thing isn't working because they've come up against someone, a particularly challenging project, particularly challenging QS, or just someone who really does things by the book and they can't kind of get past it. But it's so interesting you said that, Arthur. It really resonated because in my company, which is myself and Ricky, my husband, I'm the outside guy and he's the inside guy, very much so, and it really works. And some of the best subcontractor clients that I've worked with, they do have that as well. They really have that someone running the guys, running the sites, jumping around from place to place and making it work, and then someone who's a bit more on the business development or invoices getting paid, that kind of side of things. So yeah, it's a good partnership.
Can I ask Eve, when I think both Arthur and I smiled when you talked about this kind of like, I think you were being polite, and I don't have to be as polite because, I just don't, but I'm not that bothered about being polite. But I think a lot of main contractors actually prefer if you were really shit in terms of the kind of, the due diligence, the record keeping, because they know that, they're going to be able to slip a lot more through the net. When you're talking and you're advising your subcontractors on being most successful with main contractors, and I assume, for you, your definition of success is a long-term relationship with the main contractor, getting multiple recurring subcontracts. What do you advise them in terms of like how on it to be? Because sometimes you can go the other way, right? Sometimes you can, ask a million RFIs at or tender clarifications, and you can put the main contractor off thinking, oh, this guy is going to be all over us, and we're not going to let anything slip. And what do you advise them to do in terms of like keeping that balance? Because do you see what I mean? I feel like you've got to find a good
100%. And firstly, I also actually agree that a lot of the time main contractors are quite happy for subcontractors not to have the knowledge, not to have the information, not to be on it about, protecting their company. It's something that Ricky and I have seen throughout our careers. It's something I specifically as a quantity surveyor saw a lot. It's something that breaks my heart, to be honest. It's not right. A good business model should be that the supply chain are properly, they sign up, they know what they're signing up to, they come in, everyone makes money on the job. We don't have all this argy-bargy. There's a bit of taking advantage of subcontractors, and that's what really fires us up, and that's part of our kind of mission with what we're doing. But in terms of what advice we give, it's a very good question. The answer, of course, is it depends. So you definitely can go too far. You can damage relationships by being that person. And I had this main contractor side where, something could have been easily a meeting and we would sort it out, but I've gotten a formal letter and it's like, bam, like, here's a formal letter of delay. And it's like, couldn't we just have had a phone conversation about this, because we can fix this? So I think it's the balance of coming in and being really collaborative with the main contractor where you can. Everything that we're striving to as well, with what we want to do and the change we'd like to see in the industry is not, subcontractors good, main contractors evil. Sometimes subbies come in too hard. They don't understand what they don't know. They get, they're not sure and they think they're being taken advantage of when they're not, because that sometimes happens too. So it's the whole relationship piece that we're really interested in. So better relationships, better project outcomes, better for all businesses, better for the main contractor as well if the supply chain is, they have this continuous run with them, all of that. So in terms of, sorry, to answer your question directly, it really does depend. It's the relationship piece. And what I would suggest is generally have all your ducks in a row in the background. Always have all your ducks in a row. That means that you know how many blokes, whether it's through software, whether someone keeps in a meticulous daily diary, however it's done, that all the information and data is in the background, so you can always back up any claim and you can always prove yourself if you need to. That's how many blokes came to site every day. That's when deliveries were made. That's any information if the client has given you a verbal instruction on site, anything that you've been told to do, it's just meticulously recorded, right? So always have that, no matter if you have the best relationship ever, because you don't know what's going to happen. If a QS, as I said, sometimes a new QS comes in, sometimes the project goes bad and suddenly they're losing money. So just have that, always have that. And then how you do it that's, I guess, your inside guy bit almost. And then how you do that in your relationship with the client, it's going to totally depend on what that relationship is, really. So if it's a new one, I would be a little more softly, until you figure out kind of what the lay of the land is. I'd always be trying to get in-person meetings, phone calls at the least, go onto site before you're doing things like dropping in letters or very formal, claims and things like that. Try and work things through with them where you can. And then if the relationship just isn't going that way, then you step into the more, here's get a little bit stricter. So that would be how I would kind of approach, client relationships. Like, we are all humans, so trying to do the human relationship thing before we get off too far into the legal contractual stuff at every step, I think is always advisable.
I wanted to know, and you kind of answered this a little bit. Do you have any recommendations, or would you actually warn against starting the relationship in a way? And actually, I have a client in mind here, and I won't mention any names, but I feel like they started the relationship in this very kind of like, oh yeah, sure, don't worry, I'll do that, yeah, don't worry. And then it just continued like that. And, it's taking some time to tell them and open their eyes to the fact that, hold on, you're just losing money here from this relationship. It's not even beneficial for you to have this relationship. So what's the balance between, you want to get your foot in the door with a main contractor, but at the same time you want to set the tone of, I am a professional business and I do track things. I do. Do you see what I mean?
Absolutely. I think it's definitely boundaries. Like, there will always be people who will take advantage if they can and take more from us. There's always people who will be kind of takers. Sometimes you don't know that until you get into relationship with someone, whether they're giving back and forth pretty equally. Sometimes you have that too with main contractor, subcontractor relationships, where the subby does come in and does an extra couple of days of work on something, but the main contractor's been super good to them and they have great payment term, and you have this very, great kind of relationship. I see this more, to be honest, with the tier 2 main contractors than the tier 1s. There seems to be a bit more flow, but it also sometimes depends just on who, like, the project manager or construction manager is. Sometimes there's a lot of nice, you guys both know this yourselves, I'm sure, but you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, and it kind of flows and it's fine. But sometimes there is that, can you just? What I would suggest is, I don't know. It's an interesting one, because do you say we just don't ever do any freebies? I don't necessarily think so. I think sometimes that kind of give and take relationship can be really smooth and really nice. But the way that I would do it and the way I would suggest it, which is probably a real QS kind of way to do it, but that's who I am, so that's what I can tell you, is I would probably say there's a certain amount, there's up to a certain value that I'm happy to do as the odd favour. So maybe it's £1,000 here and £1,000 there, depending on the size of the job. And I just keep a little track. And then when it's kind of, the third favour and it's going to push me over, I would probably just say, would you mind just sending me an email on that? I think there might be an extra cost. And I would just, keep it kind of casual. And that's probably the way I would approach it, because again, it's so easy not to be tracking anything and have the costs, kind of not know what's happening with them. Sometimes the client prefers to know as well. Sometimes if they're just saying, oh, can you go and do this, they actually might be expecting you're going to put in a cost for it. So yeah.
It reminds me actually of something that we've added to a few clients now, this idea of like swallowed costs as part of their kind of tracking and dashboards. So kind of basically that list you were talking about, actually getting that number front and center on a client dashboard view when they're looking per project, because then you kind of got a feel for like how much you're giving away for free. And I feel like a lot of what we've just talked about over the last 10 minutes can really be summarized by this feeling of just stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And like, I've been there before where when I got into like really investing in tracking things, tracking all my communication, and this only came about after some litigation where I kind of got fucked because I didn't track anything, and my lawyer said you should have logged all of this, you should have archived these emails. Was like, there's an aura of confidence around everything you do, because you're like, I'm not gonna go down the records, but if I need the records, if I need to know exactly what hour I sent this and what hour you responded, I can. you know, there's a sense that when you have that stuff in the back end, you don't necessarily need it, but you know you've got it there just in case, you know, you ever have to go. And I think now, talking from the kind of the site guy, the outside guy, that is where I think it translates, because the outside guy knows if he needs to go back, you know, you've got that information, you can kind of drill down into those details.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like your little secret weapon in your back pocket. You don't want to pull it out unless you really need to, but if you need to protect yourself because suddenly you're being asked for a lot of proof, you've got it there. It's the same, to be honest, even from tender stage all the way through. A lot of people will go through and just tender on rates. They won't have the full build up of what they put into it. But if you don't know your labour, plant, materials, overheads, profit, risk profile, right from the start at tender stage, you leave yourself in this really woolly place where it can't kind of be tracked through. I do think it's that confidence. We do talk about confidence quite a lot, actually, Rick and I, because it's that sense of, we're always thinking, when our clients go and sit down in a meeting with the main contractor and the main contractor suddenly just asks them 17 random questions about things, do they have the right language? Do they have the right information in the background? Do they know what they're talking about? Can they kind of stand up for themselves a bit if they need to, but also present their company in such a professional way and feel proud of what they're doing because they know the answers, because they've got it kind of all set out. And I think, yeah, what I love about the idea of having that on the dashboard there, JP, as well, we're always thinking about that too. How's that data really easily, how is it really easy to achieve and grab that information? Like, how can you, when you have your outside guy who doesn't want to sit there in Excel for 4 hours when he gets home from site, how do you make that easy?
Yeah, it's it's a challenge.
It is, and it's also, you know, just actually getting people to use. You know, you can have the best system in the world, but you've got to meet people halfway there, and it has to be something that is going to be used by that guys on site, whether it just be the PM and, you know, and there has to be that bridge of knowledge between whoever's doing the Excel spreadsheets.
Worth adding though, Arthur, just very quickly, to anyone that's listening to this and thinking, well, I'm like nowhere near being able to track that, is there's a middle stage of being directionally correct with what you're tracking and what you know what I mean? And I think sometimes when we talk about these things, they're like, oh, you know, I'd need to be tracking like 1,000,001 things. But at least if you started somewhere and you knew roughly whether your project was up or down, or roughly to the nearest 10 grand how much stuff you were giving away for free, that's still better than literally knowing nothing, right?
And I think you're right. We should kind of, I mean, we have it as well. When once we show people what's possible, they start asking for crazy metrics, and we go, you're not even tracking material costs and labor costs for your job. So why don't we start with that, and then we'll, you know, think about all these strange, you know, lagging metrics on X, Y, Z, and all this sort of stuff. But I mean, it's great. You know, we're happy when we get the forward-thinking entrepreneurs and you know, the owners of the construction companies who are like, actually, I really know I need to do this. But I actually wanted to go kind of back. We were talking a bit about, I guess, getting your foot in the door. What about the guy that has one main contractor and that is their cash cow? What would you say to telling them to branch out and don't just put all your eggs in one basket? Or would you know, what's your advice around that?
My whole body just tensed up when you said that. So I think that's the answer. You know, it's, even if that's been a really consistent long-term relationship, we don't know what's going to happen with the future of construction companies. We've obviously just seen ISG go bust. There's a lot of companies who've been impacted by that, including, unfortunately, you know, trickle-down insolvencies due to large amounts of money outstanding and that type of thing, where you just don't know. So you just don't know. I don't think ISG was a surprise. There's been rumors the last couple of years, but even these companies that seem so big and so solid and have so much going on, you don't know about their future. Even if their future is really solid, you don't know if they're not going to start coming out and treating the supply chain in different ways. Was it Vistry that came out and said everyone had to knock 10% off their prices? I saw another main contractor apparently is going to start talking with supply chain about the value that they're adding. So you don't know what could shift in that relationship. You don't know if they might have a new commercial director come in who just completely changes the tone of how it is to work with them. There's just a lot of reasons that I think it's not sensible to, even if it's been a really great, meal ticket kind of, they're great, they look after you, it's amazing, they always pay you on time. I think it's pretty sensible to keep your keep your hand in the game a little bit with maybe just seeing if you can get one other nice little, maybe smaller tier 2 main contractor or something, be tendering for them and see if you can't just get one other in the mix there.
How much do you suggest, Eve, that especially if you're working or looking to tender for a new contractor, a main contractor, to look into the financial stability of that contractor? Because you've mentioned there that it almost sounds like a lot is out of your hands, and sometimes a contractor can look horrendous but they've been going for tens and tens of years, and then others, there's no sign of them going bust, and then the next day they're gone. So sometimes you read those sorts of things and you think, well, does it matter what what am I going to learn that that others wouldn't already know? Do you recommend people actually, subcontractors, do much due diligence, and what should they do that's worth it, and what should they not do because it's just a waste of time and resource?
Yeah, definitely recommend it. I always think, honestly, it's the gut feel at the end of the day. So, do your due diligence and then trust your gut is what I would say. But the things that we usually recommend is having a bit of a look on Experian and seeing how they're trading. For the larger companies like your ISGs and your larger companies, just having a bit of a look on the construction rags, seeing what they're saying about their kind of general financial health and stuff like that, see what the news is. And I just, something that I think I can't, is so valuable, but not everyone has access to it. I know that, but is network who are working for them. If you can reach out to, your other construction buddies, your mates, like anyone else who has a construction company. Hey, have you worked for XYZ? Or do you know anyone who's working for them? Are they good payers? Do they usually squeeze you down? Because sometimes it's, financial health is important. So as I said, we usually recommend having a bit of a look on Experian. You could always look at the, company's house and stuff. But as you say, things can change quickly. But I think the treatment of the supply chain is actually sometimes more what's the word, kind of relevant. So are they good payers? There are lists I'm going to forget what it's called now, you might know this, but there is a construction prompt payment index that you can take a look at. So things like that can be helpful. Yeah, I'll see if I can get the link. But I do think a lot of it's not always in the numbers too, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's how, if they're always pay on time, but they never pay you your variations, then you know what I mean? So sometimes it's in that actual relationship that others are having with them as well.
Yeah, makes sense. I saw I was going through the syllabus of tender trainers, which I'm sure we'll get to later on today's call. But one of the things that struck me as interesting, and I'd love for you to talk about a little bit, is it seems like you would typically help a subcontractor work out what types of tenders, what space is best for them in terms of, I guess, their goals for the business, what they're set up to do and stuff like that. I'm curious if you could give a very quick insight of how one might look at the landscape of construction and where they are at, and work out, who do I want to tender for? What type of tender should I take on? What type of one shouldn't I? I just want to get a gauge of what the metrics or what the dials are that you can use to work to optimize the right type of stuff for your business, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. It's one of those ones that the answer lies within. Like it's kind of quite, I think, not right for someone externally to come out and say this is what you should do and this is where you should sit and this is who you should work with. But what we do with our clients is help them to refine that kind of list when they're going out to tender of what feels right to them. A lot of the time, if you're already a little bit established, or most of our clients who have subcontract businesses, they've come off the tools. So a lot of the time, what you really enjoy working on, or where you might stand out a little bit, where the type of work you do is maybe a little bit more technical, or you're happy to come in and do those, say, slightly unusual, like groundworks projects that most people don't want because they're an odd size, but you don't mind that it's quite risky and there's a bit under the ground, or you kind of know that you actually really like projects where you're doing RC frames but they need to be kind of extra strong because there's something unusual, whether it's, you've got to think about, like, I was speaking with someone recently who they had to think about, like, impact for blast, like,
Yep.
So
Embassies
just that
and stuff
type
like that.
yeah, exactly. So just that, yeah, exactly. So if you already kind of, I mean, that, you might already know that you just have a feeling that it's something you like. I think where, if you're going to be clever about it, and you're coming in to work with main contractors, sometimes it's those parts that you can come in and do. Like I said, maybe it's an odd sized piece of groundworks that the larger groundworks companies won't touch. It's a bit risky. It's relatively small. If you can come in and do stuff like that, sometimes that's quite good to get your foot in the door. Or if you come in and do, maybe you come in and do strip out, but you guys are really good, they're really efficient, and that could lead on to other internal works. But if you get in with the construction manager, I think there's things that you can do to be a little bit clever about where you go with it. But also a lot of the time it's actually just, what's the skills in the team? Ultimately, we're going to do a great job. Am I going to enjoy working for this client? Sometimes you don't know until you know. Is it in an area that my guys want to work in? Like, are they going to have to drive for 5 hours there and back? And then is that going to get them offside, or are they quite happy to work away? So a lot of the time it's actually just down to you and your team of people, what your skills are, what you enjoy doing. I don't think you can get past, that's, if you can actually enjoy going to work, that's a massive plus. Who your team are, what they enjoy doing, where they're based, all that type of thing, to be able to, accurately see what's going to be a good shout for your company.
And in terms of the, let's say this fictional subcontractor, they've worked out what they want to do. With main contractors, typically if everything's tendered out and things like that, it can often be a very heavy spreadsheet sale. There's just emails and spreadsheets and there's very little kind of conversation. How can you firstly make a main contractor aware that you're niching, you're specializing in certain thing, and then once you do get your foot in through the door to get the tender invitation, how can you then demonstrate, especially if they're a very put it in an envelope, send it, we'll let you know in 2 weeks if we want to talk to you anymore. Like, how can you still, utilize that closed opportunity to show that you have got some specialism, you have, put some thought into it? Have you got any, maybe it could be tips and trips, or tricks and tips, or maybe it could actually just be high level thinking that just kind of comes across when you speak to them? I'd love to pick your brain about that.
That's a really, really, really good question. So I do. I think effectively, I mean, it's just such a good question, because you're right. People often pack it like boxed into, and this is what we need you to do, and that's it. I have seen a trend with main contractors that I've worked for when I've been doing procurement, towards wanting to just get more into the one package. So whether you kind of specialize in a specific thing or not, they may be just trying to kind of go, let's just fit everything into this one package. So you may have a landscaping package that has all sorts of random external things, metal work, and, and it all just comes in, even if they have nothing to do with metal work, so because they want it in one package, whether you sub it out or not. So how I would say, how can you kind of put forward what you're great at and stand out in that. It's always in the fact that you're the specialist, right? So main contractors are generalists. They have every single package on the project, however many that is. So, probably generally I'd say 20 to 30 packages, maybe more. And their QSs, I've been running, up to 16 packages at a time. So they are generalists. I don't know as much about construction as my subcontractor clients do, and that's just the truth, right? In terms of how things are constructed. But so where you can really stand out is by being the specialist. And that means being really onto it about what specifications do what, about your technical knowledge, and about you can get that into your tender return. And the ways that you can do that, I mean, the best ways are that you do have a site visit with them and you're walking around and you're able to see this detail here that you've got drawn on that's coming up. Or if it's not site visit because it's, it's in the future and it's not been built yet, that you're able to sit down with drawings and say, see this detail here, I think there's going to be a clash here. What are you going to do about this? Because the follow-on trade, this is what usually happens, and show your expertise through that. I'm always like meeting first, like phone call first, do you know what I mean? Wherever you can to build a relationship. But if you don't have that opportunity and you really just have to get the tender return back and they're not talking to you, which is frustrating, but it does happen. What I would do within the actual tender, there's a few things, right? In your assumptions, qualifications and exclusions is an opportunity to say, I'm excluding this and I'm making this assumption, and kind of make it clear that you really know technically what's going on. In your pricing, there's an opportunity to do that if you see a good alternative, for example, where you're like, they've specified this and this won't work together, this system and this product or whatever. So there's an opportunity there to include something below the line and say, we've priced what you've asked for, but for these reasons, I wouldn't necessarily go with that, and this is the below the line price. So yeah, just kind of stepping into your I'm the specialist space and being quite technical in your return around this is the design information we would need to see, the specific, getting that back to them. I think that's where you can really show your knowledge.
Kind of makes me think as you talk that, there probably is this big mindset shift for many that the tender process is not just a process of estimating, it's a sales process, right? And every piece of email, communication, site visit is a sales pitch. And, you should have your sales hat on and not necessarily ask the question because you're curious, ask the question because it's going to make you look good. Sometimes there's going to be things like that, as builders, contractors, often don't see ourselves as salesmen and kind of maybe shy away from that, but actually looking at it just makes me think more about the sales.
And I think as well, it's this going beyond just competing on price. I think that's something that we're definitely, from a mindset point of view as well, encouraging people to get away from that mindset. Although the climate kind of dictates, the current climate or the economic climate, what the clients want does dictate that to a certain extent. And I would say having the confidence to just walk away when it is just, okay, you just want to go with the cheapest person, regardless of if they're going to do a good job. The reality is, they know that price is not realistic, but for some reason you're going to go with it. Okay. What would you say is a kind of good percentage, or do you even explore that with your clients? Like, okay, you should be, because again, going back to when we were talking about, I want a job. Well, if the job isn't profitable, then 100% of nothing is nothing. Whereas if you only win 40% of 20% of tenders, but actually they're amazing for you and you love working for them and you make a profit, etc. What do you say around the people that are like, I just want to win more tenders? What is the good percentage?
Oh, so many thoughts there. So firstly, I just quickly like to address the sales thing because we hate salespeople in construction, right? And I think it's so funny because we all have businesses and we have to do it. And it's something that I'm always playing with my own company, that like I know we don't like salespeople, I have to make sales, and how do you kind of do that? So I think that you're absolutely right there, JP. You've got to be able to do it as a sales process, and you do have to be able to do the sales piece. And it's about building trust, and that's what sales are: is building trust and making people kind of believe in, asking people, I guess, to believe in you and what you're doing. And some of that can just be through a lot of people that do think it's purely on the numbers, right? And they think that tenders. I hear this all the time. I believe it's a misconception. From my experience procuring for main contractors, from my experience estimating for subcontractors before we started the tender trainers, and now with our work with the tender trainers. And the reason I believe that is because particularly when I've been main contract side, a part of those processes, no one in any room that I've ever been in is saying, I'm pretty sure these guys can't do the job, but they're the cheapest price, so let's just give it to them. There is a lot of conversation about effectively trust. Do we think they can do it? Do we think they can do it on time? And yes, price, like we're heavily driven by price in construction. I have a lot of thoughts about the way that financials work, and I don't think it's right. But it's not the only driver. And that's where if you come into site and you're able to, construction managers and so on often have a lot more to do with the tender being won than you might realise, and they often have the opportunity to say who their favourite is and who they want to come and complete the work. So building that trust with them around the fact that you are a specialist, that you really can get the work done, as well as kind of showcasing through the tender process that you know what you're doing, and building that trust in, and then getting the price right for your company, which may not be the winning price. So as you said, Arthur, it's not, you don't want to win every tender. If you're winning them all, then there's an issue, because that shouldn't be happening. I often think about 20% is about right. You're not going to win everything you go for. Having a keen eye on who you're tendering for. If you've gone for someone, if you tender for them 5 times and you're not getting anything, or you haven't had anything for quite a while, having a high level conversation with the director about why that is. So not kind of going on and on tendering. And it's the relationship piece. I think what we see is that if you don't have any kind of existing relationship and you're not able to get some kind of relationship going through the tender process, it's going to be a lot harder to win it. So I'm a huge fan of LinkedIn. Most of our clients come through LinkedIn, but for example, if someone reaches out to you on LinkedIn to tender for something and you can't get them on the phone to have a conversation with them, let alone a site visit, that's the type of thing I probably wouldn't be going for that. So it's not tendering for 25 projects at a time. It's more like, what's the 2 or 3 that if you won them, you'd be super excited about, putting a bit more time, focus, energy, attention into those, pushing yourself forward as a specialist, building relationship, and then, winning the ones that you can actually make profit on.
Yeah.
Interesting. I wanted to, there's one, I know I'm conscious of time, but there was one question I really was curious to hear about from you, even. This is because you come from an interesting background as a main contractor, QS, but also now heavily involved on the other side. So I really believe you've seen both sides of it. I wanted to ask you about the infrastructure. And when I say infrastructure, I mainly mean office team, but this also could apply to site infrastructure, software infrastructure. What kind of, if you were to break, let's say, a subcontractor into revenue brackets or size of project brackets, what kind of infrastructure do you think a subcontractor should have within each of those brackets? As in, let's say, 0 to $500,000, $500,000 to $2 million, $2 million to $10 million. And I'd really be keen for you to answer this question from what does a main contractor like to see perspective as well, because I think that would be really interesting for a subcontractor. Does this make me a bit nervous because the director is also the owner and he's also the QS and he's also the estimator and he's also the guy that cleans up on the site as well, and obviously this conversation has been partly based around winning tenders, but I know you were keen to talk about whole life cycle, so feel free to answer the question if you want to focus on to win a job, you should have this type of infrastructure in your company, or answer it, to successfully deliver a job, you think this is the type of infrastructure a subby should have and be profitable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think where I could probably answer that with the most, the most knowledge is around the commercial team, because that's what I know and that's what I do.
Yeah.
In terms of commercially, so it's not unusual for subcontract directors to be doing a lot of the commercial, having a lot of the commercial ownership, even through to £5 million plus turnover, where they may actually be responding to things, getting the variations in themselves, the estimate in themselves. As a main contractor QS, I absolutely don't see a problem with that. It doesn't. The thing is that a lot of businesses try to appear bigger than they are, and I'm not really for that. I think that we should be honest about where we are, and I think actually there's quite a lot of some main contractors will only want to work with like bigger companies, but I have definitely worked for at least one main contractor integrated developer where we were actively seeking out smaller companies because they have less overhead, because they're easier to build relationship with, sometimes that type of thing. So I wouldn't necessarily try and like put on a front, if you know what I mean. Although, like, emailing from your Hotmail address, like, no, like, get email addresses, get a good website, like, come on, guys. So that's what I would say. So I don't think, like, if you're the person who's dealing a lot with the financials, then be the person and be honest about it, and you send the emails and you send the estimate and you have the meetings. In terms of, like, what makes sense for a construction company, some subcontractors, some subcontract directors are all over the numbers, and that's their thing, and they want to hold it, and they want to hold that ownership for as long as they can, right? So if that's you, then that's fine, that's your strength. If it's not, and you need to go out externally, the one thing we always say, of course, because we have our courses, but it's because it's true, is as a subcontract director, you need to know the numbers yourself. You need to learn it. So even if it's not your thing, you can get a response from a quantity surveyor, and you can look at it, you can read it, because that's your company. So you do need to know those things. But if you were looking at, I would say, so to answer your question, what I would generally say is up to probably somewhere between turning over 2 to 5 mil. I think it's fine to have freelance QSs, estimators, be doing it yourself. As long as you've got a lot of trust in the people you're working with, as long as they actually care about your company and they're not just randomly doing bits and pieces and don't. We have a really great QS consultancy we can recommend who really cares about his subcontract clients. Bringing in, when you get to kind of like maybe more closer to the £4 to £5 million mark, I think that's £5 million plus. That's generally where having like a full-time, actually, properly trained quantity surveyor might start to make a lot more sense. Perhaps someone who estimates for you, manages the project all the way through as a quantity surveyor, does final account, etc. That's generally what we would kind of see in terms of size, I think, and then from there building out a team. I would also say there is a shortage of QSs, 6,000 short, apparently, in the UK. And sometimes at subcontract side, if you're turning over £3 or £4 million a year, you're honestly probably not going to be able to pay the types of salaries that a really great QS is going to have, or be able to pay them, easily. And it may not make sense, and it may be really hard to track them, because they could go work for a large main contractor on a, £400 million tower block somewhere and have that status, right? So what we see a lot with the teams that we work with, and what I actually think is a really, really sensible way to go, is that there's someone in your team, so maybe there's a contracts manager or something like that, and you can bring them through and start, who's just really cluey with the numbers, knows exactly everything that it takes to build the job. So, every kind of socket that has to go in, or, every piece of containment, they're just all over it. But they want to do a bit more. Maybe they're getting older, maybe they don't want to be on site so much. Maybe they're in their 50s, 60s, and they start coming to the office a couple of days a week and do it and learn it, and come in and learn from someone who knows what they're doing. But and they can start to do the estimation, or they can start to kind of get involved with it. So we see that quite a lot with teams, where you're taking already highly skilled people and teaching them the commercial bit, and that can work really well. I feel like I didn't give you the most super clear answer, but that's kind of how I see commercially things happening.
That's brilliant. I kind of actually thought maybe we could look at it in a different way. but still kind of get to the same conclusion, or the same usefulness for listeners from the point of view of the main contractor. And you already mentioned about the emails. Are there any red flags in terms of, like, this guy takes ages to get back? Like, where? Because I think really you shouldn't. I don't think it's right to be looking at infrastructure and things in terms of, oh, this makes me look good. You should be thinking about it from a utility point of view, right? So what are the things that you would say is like, okay, if you're taking ages to get the tender, you need help, or you need to rejig your priorities or whatever. From that main contractor point of view, what were the things that you would say, okay, if I saw that, I'm worried about that company? Or if I are there any things that you could say that kind of were red flags?
Yeah, it's the there's a few things. So I think there's two kind of possible ways I could go, so I might just quickly touch on both. If I was looking at a company to work for us for the first time, and I was trying to suss out their size, for example, and see if they've got the goods to come in and do it, right? The things that I would usually be looking for is I would always check their website, and I think that's quite funny because I don't think that subcontractors usually have very good websites. You can really quickly get a feel for how big a company is, because the professionalism of it, if they have an about and they have team members on there, right? If they have a board, then okay, they're probably like £20 million plus, subcontractor. If it's just them and someone in the office, then you really can quickly get a feel for, probably you can see the projects that they've done, right? So you really quickly get a feel for what they're capable of doing. So I was always straight on the website. I would always check, oh my gosh, this is a really good one to know. Credit rating. The amount of clients who come to us, if your credit score is terrible, you're not going to win tenders, because every main contractor QS checks your credit score. And if it's not good, they're like, this person isn't going to be able to keep trading throughout the project. They let us down halfway through. I actually worked on one Blackfriars in London, where the concrete subcontractor unfortunately went bust halfway through, right? So, which was the VARS project. So that really screwed things up. So they're checking your financials. So the amount of subcontractors who come to us who didn't realize that their credit score is like 20 because they got, something random happened with their insurance or something that they didn't even know about. So check your own credit score is the biggest thing I can say. Go onto my company profile. You can get a free profile, and then you got to sign up, and then you can cancel it before you get paid or whatever. But go and check your own credit rating. So it's credit rating, it's website, do they have proper emails coming from a proper email address? So they're just emailing from me from admin at, usually you can tell they're really small. And so that's in terms of the feel about company size. Those professionalism pieces I think are really important. Website, email addresses, having proper tender documents that you're returning. So if you put in a program that speaks volumes about your professionalism, almost no one does that. But when they do, you really know. Usually you get programs back from your £20 million plus type of subcontractors, your big ones. If you get one in, that speaks volumes about your professionalism and probably your size. And what else would I say about that kind of sense of... There's just something I want to say as well, which is around, you mentioned there about people coming back to people, right, Arthur? So I think we had this, I remember the one tender that I did, which was for, it was like an RC frames frame kind of tender that was going out, and we had someone who just really wanted it, and they came so prepared. They had the detail of the estimate was incredible. They had the drawings all kind of printed on, that see-through kind of graph paper, and they'd taken measures on it, and they came to every meeting that we asked for. They gave us every piece of information they wanted. They really wanted the job. And we said something about them. Actually, my senior manager said to me, they're basically selecting themselves, aren't they? And that's what it felt like. They were like, give me the job. I'm ready. I'm here. I'm ready to do it. And it doesn't mean that the price doesn't matter. It's not looked at. But there's something in kind of almost going, as I said, go for less and kind of show up and claim them. Like, come to the site visits and be like, we can do this. We've got this. Yep. This is what you'd have to do here. When we come in and do this, just talk to them like you've already got it. When we come in and do this, that piece is going to have to go here. And just not to be arrogant, because, people get put off by that, but just to show up and go, yeah, I really want this. If you do, and kind of put yourself in that kind of space with the energy that you bring.
I think that reminds me of, like, because especially Arthur and I, we deal a lot in systems, and we're obviously often looking at streamlining, making repeatable processes and things like that. But what stood out when you said that about, like, this subcontractor in this story selecting themselves, is it kind of makes me feel like in the sales and tender process, we don't have to be we don't have to give everybody mediocre service. We can give 3 of the tenders mediocre, and if one we really want it, we can give a better level of service. And sometimes, because I remember drilling this in with my sales team back in the day, I used to always say, like, we're not a charity. We don't have to give equal service to everybody at sales stage. Like, if we want this job, they can get the 5-star treatment. And if we don't really care about this other job, we give them the 2-star treatment. And I think that's something that, like, personally anyway, I would really kind of recommend subcontractors to kind of think about, because there are some jobs definitely where you can just select yourself easily just by putting, a little bit more effort in.
It's such a good shout, JP. Yeah. And if you kind of like, it'd be nice to get it, but I'm not super fussed, then why are you kind of putting so much energy towards it? Yeah. It's definitely, it's definitely a really good shout.
I think it comes back to when we were talking about, knowing what your ideal job is, right? And then because obviously we all have the ideal jobs. We have our ideal clients, and those ones were like, look, we would love to work with you, and we contact them often and things like that. But then we still need to be, talking to everyone, talking to lots of other people. But then when you hit upon it, you do have that next level of personalized, you make sure everything, all the T's are crossed, and all that sort of stuff. I think we could go on and on here. I would love to have you back on, actually.
I have one final thought, but I would love to come back on.
I want to make sure that we do focus on, anything that you wanted to talk about in particular. Was there anything that you wanted to bring up?
Well, I have one final thought on what we were just talking about, and I always think it's so funny because our company, that name, The Tender Trainers, with a Kiwi accent, sometimes people think I'm saying Tinder. And I do feel like, which I think is like hilarious, right? Also, side note, someone in construction on LinkedIn messaged me, love your business name, how Tinder are you? Wink, wink. I was like, oh my God. And then promptly screenshot it, blocked him, and put it on LinkedIn for the world to see. But in terms of, I do feel there's like there is a relational, almost like dating kind of approach to tendering, right? And I think that sometimes people are, filling out, as you said, almost it feels like it's that mediocre service, JP, even if they actually really want it. They, complete the tender, they submit it, and they're not showing up going, hey, I'm really keen, like, have you got the tender? Have you got any feedback for me? Like, when are you guys, just so you know, I'd love to get this work. And it's actually something that I don't think that subcontractors know, that it's actually, from my experience being in the rooms deciding who's actually going to win a tender, I loved it when subcontractors did that and showed me that they genuinely wanted it, as opposed to just whatever, I'm just putting a price in because you've asked for it. It's such a different feel. And I think that I believe, and we teach, that like showing up with a little bit of put your cards on the table and look, I'd actually really like to win this. There's actually more in that and that than you might think, and that energy is reciprocated more often than you might think. So it's not always just down to price, and that's the message that I really want to get out there.
Yeah,
Eve,
I
can
think
you give
that's
us like a like what a typical journey of a subcontractor that works with you would look like? You know, from where they might start and why they might approach you, what you end up kind of getting them through, what they have to, what kind of changes they have to go through in order to go through with you, and what the kind of outcome, the ideal
uh,
outcome would
but
be.
before you do as well, I think it would be valuable. I think your service. I think, you know, from talking to you before, I'd encourage anyone that is in this space to reach out to you guys. Who is your ideal client? Like, who? And so if you could start with that and then say, okay, this is our ideal client, and this is what we would do. Perhaps give some examples of, you know, people who have been through that process.
We've recently niched up. You know how everyone's saying you should niche down? We've recently niched up, but I will tell you who we usually work with, how they kind of come to us and how they leave. So I'll start with our kind of entry level clients. So in terms of ideal client broadly, we want to work with people who care about relationship in what they're doing, that they care about their business, that they're not just doing it for money, that there's broader reasons than that for them, and that they want to establish good relationships with their main contractor clients, etc. So that's something that we're kind of seeking with the people that we work with, because that's where a lot of the reward is for us. We start with get ready to tender, which is like our clients turning over up to £1 million usually in that space. These are guys who've come off the tools, usually in the first couple of years of business. They don't, no one's ever taught them how to tender. They did an apprenticeship. They can work in any trade. You know, we've got from cleaners, we have a lot of MEP people. It's anything that supports, you know, dry liners. We've got brickies. We've got a whole range. And where they come to us is, I've got a tender for it. It's totally daunting. No one's ever taught me how to do this. To be honest, I wasn't that great at school, and it's kind of freaking me out that I've got to read so much. That's usually the space they come to us, quite fresh with it, wanting to be able to tender for work because it's the next step for them. Sometimes they've only ever subcontracted to other subcontractors, but feeling, really like they can't overcome this next hurdle. So we teach them all of the basics of everything from how to read a tender pack through to all the templates they need to submit it back, and proper estimating, which is labour, plant materials, overheads, profit and risk, so pricing from first principles. So we teach them all the skills, and where they leave us is like, I actually get it. Like, I actually get it. Like, I know how to tender, I know how to put, you know, I'm winning tenders. But more importantly to us, to be honest, more important than winning is also, which might sound crazy because, you know, everyone wants to think about winning, but there's always the knowledge, and there's always the kind of, I know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm going for, and I know what I'm signing up to. So that's get ready. Pipeline is quite different. Pipeline is our £1 to £10 million program. So people join us for turnover. Our clients there usually join us with someone else in their team. You know, sometimes for our larger clients, they may have 3 of their team members may join us, and they join us with a bit of a different problem, which is that they usually are tendering for and winning work. You know, people kind of know what they're doing. It's all set up, but the profit margin thing is huge. The overhead, knowing what their profit margin is when they go in. Sometimes they're not winning enough tenders and the win rate's not very good, but often they're joining us going, I just don't really understand the numbers. Like, we're winning work, we get to the end of the year, accountant's saying we haven't made that much money, I don't know why. It's almost coming from that space more. And we work, also quite often they're setting up a new team, they're about to step up, or they've just stepped up into being a bit bigger. So we work with them often on a one-to-one, you know, within the program, either one person or kind of a team, and they come in. It's super process driven. So where Get Ready is quick and dirty, they come in and learn what they need to learn to tender. In Pipeline, they come in, they get tendering process in place. We teach them how to tender. We've got all the teams set up doing it. And then we also teach them everything they need to know commercially. So we've got to rebrand now because we're not even just doing tendering, all the way through to a successful final account. We teach them about contracts, etc. as well. We work on a one-to-one basis, similarly coming in and putting processes in place with teams for companies turning over 10 mil plus or smaller, but just want one-to-one support. And then we also have recently expanded our offer so we can work with main contractors as well, procurement, supply chain relationships, and starting to come at it from that angle, because the biggest thing that we want is basically better dealings with money and better relationships in construction, and coming in and doing that at main contractor level on a consultant basis is part of our next piece of work.
Nice. I think it's great that you're. I think it's cool that you're doing main contractors as well, because how amazing would it be if you started then, grouping your two kind of parties together and doing work together, because you've kind of got two multi-optimized kind of businesses that are very aligned in the way they want to work with each other, right?
Yeah, the main contractors 100%. Know that the guys that you've already worked with are going to be doing it right. So it's going to be that added layer of confidence.
100%.
We'll drop the. I was just going to mention there. We'll drop the website into the show notes, Eve. But what you mentioned LinkedIn as well as a good way to contact you. Is that the best way for people?
I'd also like. a podcast, wherever people can learn more about you, the business, what you guys do, reach out to you, etc. Just let us know.
Awesome. Yeah, perfect. So my LinkedIn is the best place. I'm on there every day, so you can always get me, Eve Lameks, Lameks. And we also have a lot of free video content on YouTube. So if you're kind of wanting to learn more and you're like, I could really do with a bit of help and support, but I'm not in a place to invest right now, whatever, don't feel that stops you from getting the knowledge. We've got about 65 videos, I think, on YouTube at the moment. They're quite detailed, and you can definitely jump in and start your learning without necessarily having to sign up to anything. So the Tender Trainers on YouTube, or my LinkedIn, Eve Lameks, is the best place to find us.
Well, we'll be adding all the links to the description. So anyone that is interested in finding out more, and as Eve said, not quite sure if you want to invest yet, but you want to learn, that you need to bridge that knowledge gap, then definitely I'd recommend heading over to their YouTube channel as well.
Oh, and Tender Talk. Just our monthly free training session, which I keep forgetting to drop you the link to, Arthur. But yeah, we have that monthly. So you guys, Arthur and JP, super welcome to come next time as well. But yeah, we have a monthly free training session. It's super informal. We have it on Teams. We teach. We have a bit of a chat. We don't do any hard selling pitches or anything like that, but we all show up to learn. And it's honestly the highlight of our month. So everyone's welcome to that. And that you can link through to from our website, www.thetendertrainers.co.uk. Jump on there and you can sign up for it.